Tere pärastlõunast kõigile! Mina olen sotsiaalteaduste valdkonna dekaan Margit Keller ja mul on suur au tänast üritust sisse juhatada ja pärast ka küsimuste vastuste vooru modereerida. Tere tulemast, kolleegid ja külalised, professor Emanuele Bardone inauguratsiooni loengule. Loeng ise toimub inglise keeles ja küsimuste vastuste voor samuti, aga mina oma alustuse sissejuhatava jutu Rahvusülikoolile omaselt räägin eesti keeles. Loengu originaalpealkiri inglise keeles kõlab siis Postdigital Education Futures in the Making, Estonia between digital hype and educational leaps. Ja loengu tutvustuseks, mis ju saadeti laiali inglisekeelsena, aga eesti keeles kõlab see tutvustus samaväärselt intrigeerivalt, et tehnoloogia ei ole neutraalne tööriist tõhususe ja efektiivsuse suurendamiseks, vaid prisma, mille kaudu me kollektiivselt ette kujutame, millise kuju võivad koolid ja meie haridussüsteem tulevikus võtta. Ja professor Bardone räägib nendest tulevikuvisioonidest ja väga intrigeerivast postdigitaalsuse mõistest meile paljudele tuttava ja võib-olla ka ärevust tekitava D-hüppe kontekstis ja selle juhtumi näitel. Emanuele Bardone on Tartu Ülikooli värske haridustehnoloogia professor, haridustehnoloogia keskuse juhataja ja haridustehnoloogia magistri õppekava programmi juht. Oma doktorikraadi omandas ta Pavia ülikoolis Itaalias ja uurimistöö keskendub hariduse tulevikule ja tulevike kujutlemisele, just iseäranis uute tehnoloogiate kavandamise ja hariduses omaksvõtu metaotsast vaadatuna. Ja tema uurimishuvide hulka kuuluvad haridustehnoloogia kriitiline analüüs ja vastutustundlik teadusinnovatsioon. Hetkel muude tööde hulgas juhendab Emanuele Bardone ka ühte järeldoktori projekti, mis tegeleb just nimelt generatiivse AI integreerimisega õpetamisse ja teadustöösse, just akadeemilises kontekstis. Ja kui ma heitsin pilgu etisesse, siis tundub, et käesoleva kalendriaasta jooksul on professor Bardone publitseerimine saanud tõeliselt turbopuusti, ehk et 1.1 ja 3.1 kategooria artikleid suutsime kokku lugeda tervelt 10, mis kandsid tänavust aastanumbrit. Nii kaasautorsuses kui esimese autorina teadus on mõistagi meeskonnatöö, aga see oli tõeliselt muljet avaldav. Ja alati inauguratsiooniloenguid sissejuhatamiseks küsin ma kolleegidelt, enamasti siis instituudi juhilt, mida kolleegid värske professori kohta ütlevad. Ja seekord kõlab see ütlemine nõnda. Ta on filosoof, kes on rännanud haridusteadustesse ja toob oma teise nurga vaatega alati aruteludesse väärtuslikke mõtteid. Ta on ka foto- ja videohuviline, kes on ikka ja jälle oma erinevate kaameratega platsisest püüda põnevaid hetki. Ta on ka programmijuht, kes on haridustehnoloogia rahvusvahelise õppekava kogukonna jaoks alati olemas. Tema mõtted viivad meid põnevate tulevike juurde. Niisiis nüüd on sõna Emanuele Bardonel umbes 40-45 minutit kestab loeng, seejärel on küsimused, vastused ja siis väike koosviibimine siin samas saalis. The floor is yours.
Aitäh. So 40-45 minutes. I'm not so sure that I will be speaking for so long. First of all, I would like to, I'm a bit embarrassed because I'm in a very historical place. I joined the university already 10 years ago, and it's the first time that I feel that I'm in the spotlight. And as the first slide, I actually thought of thanking all the people that have been with me for the past 10 years. I don't feel that this is my personal achievement. I really don't feel it. I feel that it's some sort of collective achievement that is also projected into the future, which will actually be the topic of today. And I just want to share this picture that I took last week. And there is a symbolic meaning in it, which I'm going to explain very briefly. So this is in the morning. So if you want to take a nice picture of our main building, go in the morning. 2 weeks ago, I went there roughly at 8 o'clock before going to my to my office, and there was this beautiful sun, morning sun. And if you see, it seems that the building, or part of the building, is golden. But as you know, the building is white. And I actually felt that we have the capacity, as a collective, to make our university shine and to make it golden, just like the morning sun sometimes make the building golden as well. And that's why I actually wrote it in Estonian, which is a language that I'm still struggling with, so see on meie ülikool. And I thank you all for coming and also for making this possible. So these were the acknowledgements. Now I can start with the actual presentation. I curated a lot the visual parts. So if you don't understand what I'm saying, you can just enjoy the pictures, and that would be enough. Okay, so but in terms of an outline, the presentation is divided into two parts. The first part is about EdTech. I would like to share my view on EdTech, what educational technology is, in my opinion. So it's a personal take. And a spoiler, to me, EdTech, which stands for Educational Technology, is connected with the visions of the future of education that from time to time we produce and we make. The second part is more about Estonia. It's more about what is happening in the present towards the future. And it's a case in point. I'll be talking about a work in progress, which is about THUPE, as our dean was saying. And this is an exemplification or an illustration of why I claim that EdTech is about the visions of the future of education. So EdTech and the visions of the future of education, just a terminological issue. I will be using futures of education and education future. It basically means the same thing. I did not use the expression educational future because it sounds like the future will be educational. No, it's about the future or futures of education. So just keep in mind that every time that I'm using these two terms, I'm using them interchangeably. Okay, so I promised you that there will be many visuals. This is a picture around the 1920s in France. And as you can see here, there are many, I would say, aids, scaffolding, teaching and learning. The most obvious one, paper and pencil, paper and pen. There used to be also these boards with chalks, writing boards. Then, of course, there are also paper maps, probably for geography classes. Sometimes there are also various tools for teaching sciences and other natural sciences. And then I would also list among the teaching and learning aids desks and chairs, because they are actually part of the classroom, which is the place where teaching and learning happen. So, in a way, the classroom across years, across decades, has been always the place where we have actually aids, different aids, scaffolding, teaching and learning. But the sort of philosophical question is, but when they did they become EdTech? Because in a way, I don't think that you would think that a blackboard or a whiteboard would be an educational technology. It would sound a little bit counterintuitive to list among the EdTech, for example, in this room, that can be used as a classroom. It would be weird to think that, I don't know, that this is an educational technology, this pulpit, okay? So the question is, when did these aids become EdTech? And I'm using both past and present tense because I would like to take you on a little journey that will be dealing with the history of EdTech. So when certain teaching aids became EdTech. And the place to start with, the place to start with are teaching machines. I will be mostly referring to what you can find in this book, Teaching Machines, by Audrey Waters, which is a history of EdTech. And in particular, she's talking about teaching machines, because for some historians, it's precisely when teaching machines were introduced, or were invented actually, that we can say that now EdTech starts. So the first figure that is quite important in the history of EdTech and teaching machines is this old fellow, Sidney Pressey. He was a psychology professor in Ohio State University, so we are in the United States, roughly in the 20s, 30s of the last century. And he was essentially the first inventor of a teaching machine, of the first EdTech tool. This was a testing machine, and it was a very rudimentary one. So you can see here there are knobs the students would press, and every knob would correspond to an answer to multiple choice questions. So this was basically like a testing machine, which was, though, and we will see later why, considered a teaching machine. So here's basically the unit. So here you see the student would actually read the questions, multiple choice questions, and then they would press one of these knobs corresponding to the right answer. If the answer is wrong, then the students would, again, take the same questions in order to see if finally they could get it right. Fast forward, so here we are roughly in the 30s, late 20s, and then in the 30s. And actually, Sidney Pressey developed this machine for more than a decade. He never really got to the point of commercializing this machine because he couldn't make it. So as an EdTech entrepreneur, he was not very successful. But in the history of EdTech, this is credited as the very first teaching machine. This is Skinner's machine. I think that you might be familiar with Skinner, the great behaviorist, teaching at Harvard. He joined the club of teaching machine inventors. Sometimes later, we are roughly in the late 40s and then throughout the 50s. This is a slightly different machine because Skinner thought that the student had to write the right answer. So it wasn't a multiple choice questions that students will get, but something like this. So the student would actually read on this window not a question, but a phrase with a gap to fill. And then, as you can see in this photo, the student will actually write the right answer, and then by operating a knob, the students could actually see if the answer was correct or not, and then they could move on to the next question. Interestingly enough, Skinner used this very machine in his own courses at Harvard with university students. So this was actually supposed to be for all students, but it was actually tested on university students. Skinner is considered a psychologist, but he actually had a course in natural sciences. Then I also would like to mention another teaching machine that came slightly later, around in the late 50s, beginning of 60s. You always have to consider that these were machines that took some time to develop, so they cover a longer period of time. This is Norman, I think that you pronounce Crowder. And in this case, he went back to Pressey's idea to have multiple choice questions. And the reason was, and I'm going to talk about very briefly this figure, he thought that the teaching machine was a way for the teacher or for the educational designer to understand, to collect, we would say, clues about what the students understood and what the students did not understand. So through the multiple choice questions, basically the teacher could diagnose the student. interestingly enough, and this is very important for the topic of AI, Crowder also invented that is called complex branching sequence. So both Press's machine and Skinner's machine were linear. So the questions followed the same order for everyone. Whereas Crowder had this idea that depending on the answer, in other words, depending also on the mistake that the students would make, the machine would take students to a different path. Now, if you're familiar with personalized learning, this is it, basically. So he was, and he's actually credited as the inventor of the idea of the vision of personalized learning, where basically students can follow a differentiated path depending on the level of their knowledge, in this case specifically dependent on the mistake or the mistakes that they made. So what is interesting, and this is very important for the claim that education technology deals with the visions of the future, these were not just teaching aids. First of all, because in some cases there were mere prototypes. I would say that Press's machine was or could be considered a prototype. So they were not actually, they did not become a part of the furniture of the classroom, like the whiteboard. And this is actually the point that I want you to consider. This machine existed, and I'm just reading off the slides, existed as aids, because they were actually scaffolding the teaching and learning process, but they were also visions, imaginations, and their role was to evoke the direction that teaching and learning could and should take in the future. So, in other words, these machines became a part of EdTech because they literally dealt with how we could change teaching and learning. In other words, education futures. So now I will provide a few more pieces of evidence for this claim, starting from not the machine that I briefly described before, but the claims that the inventors made. So this is Sydney Press in 1933. I'm just reading very, very quickly. So there must be, this is Sydney Press writing in a book, 1933. There must be an industrial revolution in education in which educational science and the ingenuity of educational technology, so he used the term educational technology, combine to modernize the grossly inefficient and clumsy procedures of conventional education. And then he continues describing not so much the machine as the vision that the machine itself was supposed to bring about. And this is the reason why, as I will keep saying during the rest of this lecture, it's very hard to distinguish between these teaching machines and other educational technologies from the visions that the inventor depicted or sketched out when they introduced the machines themselves. This is another example. Again, Skinner. This was a paper published in Science, 58. So like a good tutor, the machine insists that a given point be thoroughly understood, either frame by frame or set by set, before the student moves on. Machines such as those we use at Harvard, which was the place where he used to teach, could be programmed to teach in whole and in part all the subjects taught in elementary and high school and many taught in college. And then, last but not least, with the help of teaching machines and programmed instruction, students could learn twice as much in the same time and with the same effort as in a standard classroom. So again here, slightly different visions, but we see that there is a comparison. These machines are acting like tutor. Then there is a claim that we can use these teaching machines K-12 everywhere, so it's for all kinds of students. And then, of course, there are also claims about the effectiveness of these machines. And then here again, another one, this is Crowder, where basically he described the vision that the machine helps the teacher adapt to the individual needs. and the individual differences among students. Now, let me check the time. Yes, more or less. So once again, I restate the same message. When an educational technology is introduced, it brings along an imaginative dimension, which is expressed in these claims that we can call anticipations. In the future, this will happen. Or this is something that can be widely used successfully and effectively by all students. And those anticipations describe the changes, of course, the desirable changes that we want to bring about into teaching and learning in the broader context of a particular education future. So, an educational technology is as much about the machine as the future that it evokes. And this is actually very important because in my work, while I'm really a lover of different tools, the tools that we see around us, so cameras, microphones, screens, we always have to think that these are not coming alone, but they're always coming along with a certain vision that can be more or less implicit, okay? In some cases, it's made very explicit. In other cases, it's somehow hidden. Now, the entire history of educational technology can be seen in a way as the creation of visions, the production of visions of education futures, along with what? With the emerging technology of the time. So this is the radio, roughly in the 30s and 40s, then the educational television from the 50s onwards, the personal computers in the 80s. Personal computers came out in the 80s. We're not talking about the big computers that would occupy an entire room. And then, of course, more recent one like VR and, of course, artificial intelligence. So this is my sort of approach to attack. So it describes or it defines my own approach. Attack is also more than this, obviously. And I have in the audience people who do something different than this. So attack concerns those teaching learning aids that are used to evoke, and evoke is here really an important word, visions, imaginations. I also added stories. Stories are a little bit more explicit. About what? About the direction that education, including the education system, could and should take in the future. So this is the sort of definition that I would like you to consider. Before I switch to the second part, yes, 12 minutes, 12 minutes, yes. So why is it important? Why are education futures important to bring out? So the problem, okay, let me try to explain this. The problem is that when we talk about education futures, we think that we're talking about something that may happen in 20 years, 30 years, okay? But actually, when we talk about education futures, we're very much talking about how we envision the future in the present. So education futures are not predictions. They can be actually described as prediction, like, for example, we're going to have AGI in 20 years, okay? But the effect that they bring about is in the present. And that's why here I have, again, another sort of definition that could be helpful to put a stake in the ground. Education futures mobilize resources of various kinds, financial, technological, social, psychological, existential, in the present to do what? To govern the present. And I'm using this term to govern because they actually have real effects on the decisions that we make. Through what? Through envisioning what to wish for in and for education. Very often, also in our work, in our job, we are supposed to create visions. And these visions make sense in the present, because who knows what is going to become the future? The future is unknown, but nonetheless, all our anticipations will have an effect in the present. And I want to stress this verb, mobilize, because very often we make decisions about the future on the basis of what we think the future is going to be, even when, as I said, the future will be whatever it will be. So this is one reason. So we can explain why certain resources are used in a certain direction, because there are education futures, because there are certain visions that, by the way, become more dominant. But also because if we understand a little bit more how we produce those visions, and if we are also aware of these visions, we can actually become better future makers ourselves. So there is also a connection with an important literacy, which is called futures literacy. But I leave this aside because I would like to focus more on the iLeap and the futures that are produced there. So, and this is exactly the second part, which might be even shorter than this one. So THUPE as a case in point, which is an exemplification or an illustration of why I claimed that educational technology also deals with the visions of education futures, the vision of the future of education. But before I come to the AI thingy, the AI leap part of the talk, I want to briefly talk about AI as well, because I think that AI is exactly the perfect, I think that it's really the perfect exemplification of what I've been talking about since the beginning. Yes, we can describe AI as, machine learning techniques, so we can refer to the kind of technology that it is. But artificial intelligence, especially the term artificial intelligence, is itself a future. And I actually found by chance probably the best definition of what artificial intelligence is, which is anonymous. So I couldn't find who the author was. I don't think that is ChatGPT or Gemini, because I found it in a website that looked a little bit shabby, so a bit old. But I would just like you to consider this, that I think is the best definition of artificial intelligence, not machine learning, okay? And this is the definition. Artificial intelligence is the study of how to make real computers act like the ones in the movies. Interestingly enough, I actually forgot that I also had AI as promising technology. AI is a promising technology. AI is always defined in terms of what it promises, which is also an interesting issue of political economy, because it means that this mobilizes, if there are good promises, it mobilizes a lot of financial resources. Some people are saying that AI is a bubble and is going to burst. Now we know why, because it's a kind of future that promises certain things and therefore mobilizes a lot of financial resources. But I really like this idea that artificial intelligence is, there is a part of storytelling that we have to take into consideration. And as a matter of fact, there are some people who claim that Sam Altman, who is the CEO of OpenAI, is actually a storyteller in the end. So now I have another slide before turning to THUPE, because I try to visualize the quote. As a child who grew up in Italy in the 60s, I'm very much aware of this TV series, Batman. I don't know if you're familiar. It was one of my favorite TV series, and there was there the Bat computer, okay? Interestingly enough, so this TV series was made in the 60s, I think, and perhaps the last episodes were shot in the 70s. But the TV series comes from this period. At the same time, an AI researcher, John McCarthy, was actually designing a computer able to play chess. And we know how important the history of chess was for AI. And I actually felt that this is exactly proving this point, that AI is both the machinery behind what? Behind stories about the future. And as I said before, if you think of this AGI, artificial general intelligence, for some, this is bullshit. For me, I think that it's a story of the future. So what may happen in the future. So, but now let's briefly talk about the TI Hype. 15 minutes? No? Yeah, 15 minutes. I think that I still have 15 minutes. Yeah, so this is the website. This is a screenshot of the websites, the English version and the Estonian version. I put them there. My Estonian is not so good, but I feel that there is a difference. I don't know if the Estonians in the room may feel it. I think that the Estonian, the English translation is not as good. It doesn't really capture, especially Perisaru, which sounds to me like real understanding, if I'm not mistaken. Whereas in English is human intelligence. So there is an assumption that what is real is human and vice versa. But in any case, in case you don't know, the TI-Hype is, I read it, an Estonian education innovation program initiated by the president, helping schools adapt to the age of AI and fostering meaningful learning. And here I have a couple of slides that I found on the net. I think that they are not fake news. It's not created by ChatGPT, which I think expresses pretty much what I said before. So AI as the emerging or promising technology of the day. The introduction of AI comes along with visions of the future. And I think that this is a vision of the future. And this is another one. This is more about, so I let you read it because I don't dare to read it in Estonian, maybe in 2 years. So this is a vision. This is a vision of the future, okay? Just for you to understand what I mean, okay? It's not necessarily something that is described as, in the future we will have 3 legs. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the direction that we would like to take in the future, the way to go, okay? So this is interestingly enough, and I have a slide about this, I would not define this vision as techno-optimistic. You see that the president is very careful in saying that only those who can use AI in a certain way, smartly, will profit. And also in this case, this is on a slightly different topic. It projects a vision, and in this case, Linnar Vik is even mentioning Tuleviku, the future. In this case, it's more about those who will be able to use AI will replace those who will not be able to use AI in the right way. Okay, but now, very briefly about the case study. Together with my colleague Ingrid Forsler from Södertörn University, we created a case study around the formation of the iLeap. So we have tried to cover, and I have a slide with the timeline, the beginning of the iLeap. Interestingly enough, we're not Estonians, and her Estonian is even worse than mine. But we actually thought that we had to document this very important period. And we thought that this was a very important thing to do. Incidentally, this is part of a project that is going to be over soon, led by Marco Forsman, Anticipating and Mediating Future Classroom, where all these things that I shared in the first part came from. This is not a solo effort. Many of the people who participated in this project are also here. So Margus, Pirjo, Signe, Jaroslav, Miriam, and Lizzie. Lizzie is not directly involved, but she inspired many of the thoughts that I had. And this is also the only slide in which I mention names. I also thank Esther, who always helps me navigate the Estonian media landscape. So typically in the morning and at night, she reads me the articles published. Because in theory, we also have tried with Ingrid to cover the media, what was actually published on the media. But again, about this case study, just for you to know how we interpreted in general our research. So, as I wrote before, the iLeap is an Estonian education innovation program helping schools adapt to the age of AI and fostering meaningful learning, okay? And this is pretty clear. Now, in our study, we have redescribed Tihupe as a site of future work, which sounds perhaps a bit jargon, but essentially a site of future work means the group of people who produce, who are entitled and legitimized to create futures. So I can actually think of the future myself, but nobody would actually care. So, whereas the iLeap can be considered a vanguard. I don't know if you know this word. It resembles the avant-garde, the French avant-garde. In any case, the vanguard is used to describe a specific group of people who are actually intentionally act together to produce education futures. This doesn't mean that they are aware that they are producing futures, but the vanguard is the group of people who are literally making these futures. So I mentioned Pressy before, Skinner, and all the rest of it. Those were part of a vanguard, just for you to understand. In this case, we're talking about a group of people who are still alive. I also put I didn't want to mention names, so I decided to put pictures that are available on the net. And these are more or less the people who have been involved, especially in the early stage of the iLeap. And here I have a timeline just for you to understand what we did. So as you know, the president announced end of February 2025 that there would be this iLeap. From our interviews, we understood that prior to this, the president consulted with his own digital advisory council, where there was a draft presented. After that, and still before the announcement, the AI Council was involved. The AI Council was created in January 2024, and it was basically the advisory board to the Ministry of Education, just for you to understand. So the AI Council was involved, and a new document was created. We could not get our hands on it, of course, but this was basically the prehistory, what led to the president announcements. And then after that, we have a so-called interim period in which the AI Council, so this advisory board to the Minister of Education, continued, planned the activities ahead, until when basically the CEO of the iLeap Foundation was announced, and then the last episode was the massive online teacher training in August, which, essentially, for you to know, we interviewed with Ingrid all the key persons, plus we have tried to do a bit of media coverage during this period, in between the announcement, so late February, up to July. The last interview was with the person involved in the teacher training in July. So based on interviews, what did we do? We have tried to map the education futures, then these key features, these key persons were describing, okay? So the interviews was our main source. Okay, so what we saw is this. We saw that there was a core element that holds the vanguard together, that held the vanguard together, something that every person whom we interviewed sort of agreed on. And we call this a post-digital education futures, and I will explain why we decided to call them post-digital. And then we saw a number of variations. You can think of them as variations on theme in music. So there is a core element that is then refracted, so that there are many different visions and different variations that still have the same core element. And here I describe three, and I will describe them one by one. So the first is the future is yesterday vision, the Trojan horse vision, and the entangled leap vision. Before coming to these three visions, let me briefly say why the futures that the AI leap is creating, because it's something still in the becoming. Why is it that I want to use this word post-digital? So post-digital, and here I'm basically referring to Jeremy Knox and Peter Jandrich, marks a discontinuity with the recent digital past. So we use the term post-digital to mark a discontinuity with the past. Usually people think, researchers in this field see COVID as this sort of turning point, okay, where the digital became something else. It's not that we went back to pre-digital, but the digital became something else. The second is that the term post-digital stresses a change in our relationship with digital technologies. I'll be talking about digital backlash very briefly, which is a typical example in which at some point digital technologies are no longer seen as intrinsically good, but potentially harmful. The digital is no longer viewed as other to everyday life. I think that this is a pretty common experience, that after COVID, we can have a call, a Zoom call. It's much more common than in the past, because the digital is no longer seen as alien, okay, or as something innovative. I would not make the case that just because I'm using a computer or a digital or something digital, I'm innovative. And then, of course, the post-digital asks a very important question: what is new about the digital? Which goes back again to the question about the relationship or relationships with digital technologies. In the context of the AI leap, these means these things. First of all, AI is conceptualized as an arrival technology. This is a term that was recently introduced to say that AI has come to the classroom not through systems of procurements, but the users started using AI without any institutional filter. We have started using ChatGPT without the university providing us a subscription, okay? This is just the example. So AI is already in the classroom, and this is a rather different scenario from the first leap, the Tiger Leap, where the whole program was meant to bring the computers and connectivity to the classroom. In that case, we were not dealing with an arrival technology, but something that had to be brought into the classroom. And this is the element of digital backlash that I was describing. We no longer entrust our students to the technology being AI. So across the people who were interviewed, AI is not seen as intrinsically positive. I remember the days of the web and early 2000 when there was this idea that digital technologies were intrinsically good because they would help us communicate faster, better, more efficiently. And the whole thing was just to use those technologies. Okay? With AI, what we call the imaginary, the general vision, what we collectively hold, is different. And there is a sense of, there is this urge that we have to do something before it's too late. Okay? And I will see how this means in the specific case of one of the visions. And then the AI leap, interestingly enough, in spite of the fact that in the title we have a technology, AI, the challenge is pedagogical. It's not technological. And then the emphasis is on meta-competence such as learn how to learn. Okay? So it's not on a specific set of competencies, but it's about how we learn how to learn how to learn. So, okay, now let's see how much time. Do we still have 5 minutes? 5 minutes, yes. 7? 7. Okay, 7 minutes. We can actually have, I can go back to these three visions during the Q&A. So the first one is, the future is yesterday. I actually put there a machine, a car, a fast car, because the future is yesterday is the idea that, especially with AI, so this is still in the context of the AI leap, the future is yesterday, so we have to catch up. We have to do something. And the emphasis is placed on speed. And that's why I put there a car, just for you to get an idea of what the vision is all about. So the pace of change is constantly increasing. So we keep changing, and we're doing it faster and faster. Okay? So there is the urge to change classroom practices, and interestingly enough, there is this idea that the AI leap is also about what is happening at the university and also in business. So AI is something that forces us to change, revisit, do something with the way we learn. Then there is an element of opportunism, and as a matter of fact, this is a vision that is mostly representative of the entrepreneurial part of the iLeap. Part of the iLeap, because as you may know, the iLeap is composed by different stakeholders from the private sector, public sector, and from the university. So this is mostly representative of the private sector. Learning seems to be somehow synonymous with adapting. And there are biologists in the room, so you may actually consider what this means. So sometimes I had the feeling when I was listening and re-listening the interviews with some key figures from the business sector, that adapting equals learning somehow. So learning means that we adapt. We adapt to something that is constantly changing. And then in terms of knowledge production, and this is also an element of conflict, or maybe not conflict, but tension between the researchers and the entrepreneurs, the vision sees a future in which knowledge production follows a startup model. Why? Because if the future is yesterday, we have to quickly adapt to the new circumstances. So this is the first vision. The second vision is called the Trojan horse vision. Interestingly enough, this is a term that was actually used by several of the people we interviewed. And what is this idea? Let me go step by step. First of all, this is a vision that articulates what is called digital backlash. So the digital backlash is something that we have seen in several countries, in which digital technologies, as I said before, are no longer seen as something intrinsically good. In some places, the use of mobile devices is banned at school. This is part of the digital backlash. Now, we don't have this digital backlash here in Estonia, although there is a discussion. But in this context, interestingly enough, in spite of the fact that the program is called AI Leap, they don't see, some of the people envision a future in which AI needs to be controlled. So, as I said, it's not a benign force. Even more, this is a vision in which AI can cause harms, and we have to do something. And this goes back to what I said before. We need to do something before it's too late. And this is obviously related to these emerging practices in which students may actually use AI not in the way we want. This is the reason why, the third point is the reason why this vision is called the Trojan horse vision, because some of the people involved in the iLeap explicitly mentioned that this is an initiative whose main goal is to change the way we learn at school. Okay? So the AI leap is a Trojan horse. So because we have to do something, otherwise AI can screw us, then this is the right moment to bring about certain changes that we should have implemented already a long time ago. Interestingly enough, science, and in this case, I'm mostly referring to educational psychology and brain science, are the ones that are used to reasserting a sense of control over the process. So we have something like AI that can cause harm. What can we do in order to regain control? There is a strong emphasis on specific types of knowledge, notably educational technology and brain science, that leads the way. There is primacy, this is a little bit philosophical, but I still want to mention it, primacy of nature over technology. If, this is the main argument, if we know how the brain works, we can actually devise the right strategies to deal with AI. That's why nature matters, the nature of the brain, or the nature of learning matters more than the technology itself. And then, as some of the tech researchers would say, this is clearly an articulation of a future in which pedagogy comes first. Now I come to the last one, which is also the last slide. This is the entangled leap. And I'm trying to briefly explain what that means. So, in a way, the three, let me go back to the slide where I presented the three vision. So, in a way, we can see that there are, although they share these elements, the post-digital elements, we can see the futures is yesterday vision and the Trojan horse vision as somehow opposite or sitting at two extremes, and the entangled leap vision tries to sort of mediate between these two. And I try now very briefly to explain what that means. So the first element in the entangled leap is that it's an attempt to redescribe the relationship between technology and pedagogy. So in the future that they envision, the relationship between technology and pedagogy is more, as they say, entangled. In other words, we cannot say that is pedagogy first or technology first, okay? Certainly, it's not an optimistic vision of technology. So they clearly, the people supporting this vision clearly stated that technology is not positive, intrinsically positive. On the other hand, they try to refrain from the idea that we can somehow describe pedagogical interventions without an explicit reference to the technology that we're going to use. It's a bit philosophical, but it's not so much, actually. This is also a vision of the future of education in which AI isn't an ambiguous technology, because it is an ambiguous technology, and this is reflected in the fact that there is something to lose and something to gain. And this is, I think, also the attraction of the technology itself. It polarizes. Another element is that in the entangled leap, yes, it's important, educational psychology is important, how the brain works is important, but it's also important to look at how practitioners are actually changing their own practice. In this case, we're mostly talking about teachers. So, emphasis on practitioners being able to generate positive use cases. And then this is the last point that I anticipated before, not just pedagogy first, but entangled pedagogy, where basically, and this is the idea that one of the people in the AI Leap articulated, pedagogy and technology go hand in hand towards a future that to some extent is still uncertain. And this is also the reason why we have the AI Leap, which can be considered a test bed. Okay, so this was my last slide. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And now it's time for questions. Please, go ahead. And the two rules, introduce yourself and talk to the microphone, please. Well, who goes first? Margus, yes.
Hello, I will be the first one. Former professor of educational technology, Margus Pedaste, now professor of educational innovation. And I have 4 questions, but I would start with one, and then probably others can ask the next questions, and then I can come back maybe. And we made some research together on shaping educational futures based on the example of Expo 2020. Estonia was represented in this event in Dubai as an education nation. And as far as I understood, we found that actually the pedagogy there was not entangled. The education nation was envisioned by people who were not experts in pedagogy. And maybe AI Leap, as far as I understand it right now, has been also shaped in this way, that they are not pedagogy experts who actually envisioned how to use AI in future. Was it the president? Was it Linnar Viik or somebody else? So that those ideas come from somewhere else. And now we are in this situation currently that Estonia has the privilege to organize next year's international summit on the teaching profession in Estonia. Last year it was in Reykjavik, and it is all around the world every year. All the major educational policymakers from the world will come to Estonia in March. And Estonia has the possibility to have some effect on the world by shaping the vision about the future. And now what I hear, under the coordination of the Ministry of Education, we hear that they have already hired a company, a production company, to envision the future about Estonian education, or to represent Estonian education system to the whole world. And educational experts are not involved in this. In 2 weeks, we should hear about their first vision, so that we are making the same mistakes as 5 years ago. As I understand it, what is your suggestion? How could we change shaping educational futures for Estonia and the whole world?
I have to be diplomatic. I have to be diplomatic, right? Well, I think that this is exactly the reason why discussing these visions is very important, because it's on the basis of the articulation of those visions that we can actually join the debate. I mean, we had a long discussion also internally, if I may say so. Why is it? And I want to go back to the timeline, because I think that it's important. So, wait, sweet. Okay. So, as I said, the Digital Advisory Council was composed of people from the private sector, as far as I understood. It's only when the AI Council was involved that there were some experts from the university, that we had people doing research in the debate. And the problem is that we were not involved. You used to be educational technology professor. I'm now your successor, but we were not involved during this period of formation of the ILEAP. So we couldn't actually steer the process or contribute to steering the process. Because I care of my future, but I try not to be too diplomatic. I think that things have changed. So I had a meeting yesterday with the CEO of AI Leap, and was very important for the articulation of the entangled pedagogy. I feel that things have changed. So I think that, and you've been also involved now, finally, and we have a meeting tomorrow specifically on AI literacy, which seems to be, and this would be actually my question, I think that AI literacy is becoming the most important issue now, because yesterday I was having this conversation with Ivo, and he was telling me that, very frankly, he was saying, we are a testbed of AI literacy. And I think that AI literacy may become the part of the story where we can actually have our, we can provide our contribution. Because AI literacy will become fundamental for the future. This will be actually my own vision of what is going to happen. In other words, unlike other technologies, it's not just about being proficient users, but we also have to understand the impact that technology has on society, which is not just about the ethical use, but all implications on the environment, first of all, then on the political economy. There are huge interests because there is this attempt to change the infrastructure of technology behind our lives. And I think that AI literacy is the crucial point. So when I will be looking at that document, I will be looking for AI literacy or some ideas related to the AI literacy, because that would be, to me, the crucial point. And as I said, AI literacy is not just about competent users of AI, okay, but AI literate people who can also choose when not to use AI. And why? Because there might be some issues in the present, looking forward to the future.
Thank you. Now it's somebody else's turn. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Bardone. Now I have to say this. My name is Yaroslav Panasenko. I am a junior research fellow, and I have a privileged head, and I'm still having this privilege and luck to work with you. You mentioned this concept of visions of educational futures, and you also mentioned testbeds that we've been working on, and we're still working on, and I hope we will be working on also. And I thought that, according to my understanding, which is not complete, definitely, of all this concept that you brought in, that teachers, let's say teachers, have their visions of future, and these visions of future, they have an impact on their present, also their present practice, let's say. I had this feeling that these visions, they like come from, you know, this Plato's world of forms to them. And I thought at some point, working with this testbed concept and working at this testbed, case, that probably there is a need of some environments or some case or some platform, whatever, where teachers or researchers or entrepreneurs, they would have a chance and opportunity to face their visions. Because I felt at some point, please correct me if I'm wrong, that teachers and their visions, they are a little bit separate. They don't have a chance to meet together. So basically, of course, they exist together, but they don't have a chance to interact. So my question is probably two parts. Do you consider that these testbeds might be these environments? Now we are formulating them as environments for testing educational innovations. But do you think that they might be formulated as environments or as chances, opportunities for teachers and other groups to face their visions and to interact with their visions? And the second one, do you think that there is a need for such opportunity and this opportunity might be helpful? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the good question. So testbeds are, of course, sites of future work, because it goes without saying, by the definition that I proposed, because we're testing educational technologies, it goes without saying that we're also talking about possible visions, possible futures. To be honest, I think that one component of the AI literacy is futures literacy, as well as futures thinking. Because the answer to your question is yes. So I think that as part of a testbed, we need to ask teachers' visions, which is not so easy, because we can't just ask teachers, okay, what is your visions of the future? And I've been involved in these future workshops. where basically we try to elicit people's visions of the future. So it's not easy. It's not easy, but I think that as part of the testing, the visions, the futures that we are collectively articulating is actually something to address. And now, you were referring to a paper that you were leading also with Margus. I think that this is an element to develop. And incidentally, again, with Margus and with some other colleagues in the future, we were dealing with responsible research and innovation. And so how can we innovate responsibly? Which is also a very important term now with AI, okay? There is this term responsible AI. What does it mean, responsible AI? In the responsible research and innovation framework, there is a part that is about the future, which is kind of underdeveloped because one of the dimensions is anticipation, which deals with envisioning the future. And I think that this is something that must be developed and must be included anytime we're dealing with emerging technologies, with testing new technologies, because as I try to explain, as I try to explain, there is always a vision that creeps into our technologies. So the technologies are not randomly designed, but they are designed with some sort of understanding of the direction that we should and could take in the future. So the question is how to include this dimension, because as I said, it's not so easy. We can't just ask teachers, okay, what is your vision of the future? It's too abstract. So we have to find a way to engage teachers and also the other stakeholders in this broader form of understanding. So it's not just about the present, but we are creating something for the future, which is then materialized in the environment or the technology that we're testing.
Thank you. Shall we continue?
Thank you. Signe Oppermann, Research Fellow, Institute of Social Studies. And this is a follow-up question and a curiosity question as well, since at our institute we also research digital skills and digital literacy and AI use among students and young people, and also working on the definitions and operationalization of AI literacy. So my question is, how do you or how would you in your research team define AI literacy? You mentioned one component in relation to future, and how the definition of AI literacy differs from the definition of digital literacy or digital skills. So what are the crucial differences, what we are supposed to take into account, and how to operationalize this? Thank you.
I mean, these are more ideas for the future. I don't have an answer now, but I want to contribute to the discussion about that. Let me see if I can get to the point of the post-digital. Yes, I want to get to this point because I think that it's very important. So, I am among those who think that AI literacy is something different from digital literacy. And I think that the argument is not so conceptual as historical. And that's why I emphasize that when we talk about post-digital, this term, that is a bit fancy, a bit academic, but I think that it captures something important. It captures a discontinuity in the practices, in the use of digital technology that must be acknowledged. And interestingly enough, AI seems to also contribute to changing. We don't have to forget that AI, which is essentially machine learning techniques and the latest technologies, large language models, tend to be more infrastructural technologies. So, for example, you go to Google and you search for something and you had this AI bot coming out. And you yourself might have started using ChatGPT as a search engine, right? So there is something infrastructure that is changing. So I'm not so sure that the digital literacy is enough to cope with the changes in this infrastructural ecosystem, in the ecosystem where we live in. Some other people would disagree with me. They think that there is continuity, not discontinuity. But coming to the first part of the question, what is AI literacy? So at the moment, I don't have a definition. I actually came across with a very good framework that is actually called Entangled AI Literacy. We like the word entangled, where basically there were a number of dimensions that were mentioned. Off the top of my head, there was the dimension dealing what AI is, so the knowledge around large language models, guessing the next words, what is machine learning, deep learning, neural networks, and so on and so forth. So there is this dimension, but then there are several other dimensions. The environmental dimension, which is often mentioned. In terms of infrastructure, AI is not really environmental friendly. Actually, it's not at all. There are also issues with the political economy of technology, because in many cases, this means to have huge financial investments into something that may not have an immediate return. This is another dimension, so what is happening politically speaking. Then there is also a creative dimension, because large language models are the first technology that blurs the distinction between what is written by me and what is not written by me, which is called the creative dimension. Then there is the disciplinary dimension, which is basically how, as a teacher of math or science, how can I use the technology profitably in my own teaching practice, how my students can use it to learn something specifically. So this is the disciplinary dimension. Then there is also the social dimension, because we know that that artificial intelligence has huge impacts on, for example, job market, potentially so. Then there is, of course, the future dimension that I mentioned before. We need to become future literate in order to better understand what kind of futures we are creating with AI. Let me think. Then there is also the knowledge dimension and the epistemic dimension, because large language models have a huge impact also on the way in which we produce knowledge. Large language models seem to have some kind of agency that we're still grappling with in terms of knowledge outputs. This is another dimension. So this is more or less, I mean, I try to remember all these dimensions. I could also put a model there, but more or less, you see the multidimensionality of the situation, and that's why I actually think that I wouldn't say that this model this framework that I quickly described is contradicting the digital, for example, digital competence framework. I think that it's integrating it. So partly there is discontinuity, partly continuity. And I would actually start working on this, try to integrate the best of the past and the best of what we are currently producing. Certainly, I can tell you what AI literacy is not. It's not about prompting. I have the feeling that somehow this thing called prompt engineering has disappeared. In the beginning, it looked like everything depends on the prompts, which was a way to say the tool is fantastic. If you don't get what you want, it's your fault, which was a bit tricky. We know that actually it's not the case because there is an inner logic in the large language models dependent on the way it was trained and so on and so forth. So it's not just about prompting. So certainly AI literacy is not just about prompt engineering.
Okay, that was a long and very thorough answer. Before I give the chance to Margus to ask another 3 questions, I'll use the opportunity to ask a question of my own, which has been creeping in during this lecture, I very much like the sentence or the definition or the description of future visions as something that mobilize resources to govern the present, which is, I think it's an excellent way to put it. And in light of this, there have been some contemplations in the university that we should execute our DHype of ourselves within the university, because very soon we are going to receive students who have been through the pipelines of DHype, and then we should know some ways how to handle them. So, and putting those two things together, our sort of practical enactment of the university DHype and the future visions, that we shouldn't do it naively and in a naive, techno-optimistic, or this sort of, what was your first, this startup type of thinking way. So what would be your sort of practical suggestion? How should we be critical and self-reflecting in enacting our vision, whatever it might be? And how should we elicit this vision? Because I very much agree with you that eliciting anticipations and imaginaries in an abstract way is very, very difficult. And yes, what should we do with this conundrum? The trains are zooming past, we should hop on, we should do something, yet we don't want to do it naively, because we are the sort of intellectual lighthouse of the society and already sort of falling off the wagon, as was brought up by Margus, that we are now catching on. So how should we do it self-reflectively and fast? Is it possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think that most of the things that I said about the iLeap might be actually said for us. I very much agree with many of the things that the participants in our study said, because you're now stressing that the future is the past. So there is this element that we have to do something. There is this idea that probably this could become the chance for us to change something in our practice. To be honest, I very much empathize with the third vision, and this would be my answer, the entangled leap. And so let me go back to this slide. So here. So one thing for sure is that there are these speculative methods that can help us investigate, explore futures with AI, which in turn would help us understand a little bit more what we can expect from the technology, which is one of the dimensions. So speculative methods are there. I'm also involved in several project applications in which we would like to focus on that. But this would just cover one part of the AI literacy. But my answer would be, we have to grapple with the different dimensions of AI literacy. And I think that we are the university. So we have most of the knowledge that can help us face these turbulent times. Because we can cover the social dimension with social scientists, with the social studies like Signe. We have psychologists to cover all identity issues that we can have when we don't know if this is mine or ours. There is this disciplinary dimension because we are all subject experts. You are experts in our field. We are producing knowledge. We are scientists, so we know how to produce knowledge in a certain way. The political economy of AI, we have economists, and we have political scientists, so we can cover that. And this is a way in which I would address it. That, by the way, is not so different from what Ivo Visak was telling me yesterday. So we have the resources in-house to deal with all these different dimensions. He was saying, for example, that yes, the environmental dimension, because we were discussing this framework, and the environmental dimension can be addressed by the geography teacher, for example, Where is it that we should build these big data centers, and what are the problems related to those regions? So I very much bet on AI literacy, and especially the model that I was referring to. Unfortunately, I couldn't put in my presentation, but this will be my answer. We have the resources in-house, and we are the university.
I very much agree, although there will be huge difficulties selling the word entangled to natural scientists, for instance. They would hate it. But anyway, let's leave it for another time.
Although it comes from physics, because it comes from quantum physics.
Anyway, is there... Please, go ahead. Yeah.
I'm Esther Bardone. I haven't asked you this question yet, so it's a surprise. And I'm a lecturer in ethnology, so I come from cultural research. I wanted to clarify one issue. How much is culture addressed in D-Hype, the AI leap? Because education and technology are also culturally situated. You get what I mean? Like how much it matters that we talk about it in Estonian cultural context. We are trying to communicate in Estonian language. This is something I've been puzzled about a lot myself, how this all has an effect on our culture. Has this issue been addressed?
No, no. I mean, we may actually discuss the language issue, because Estonia is a small language, so spoken by a very small number of people. So, and discussions like that are actually part of the media coverage. So there have been discussions around that. So at some point, somewhere in May, the director of the, I actually forgot the Institute of the Estonian Language, I think that this is the English translation, was involved in the AI Council. But the problem is that the ILEAP decided not to have their own model, so to say, although the promise was that it would be highly functioning in the Estonian language. So this is one way. The other way, I would say that if I look at the three vision, I would say that there's not so much awareness related to the fact that both the learning and teaching are actually cultural practices. So it's not that learning, it's not that learning is somehow a natural phenomenon. It's rooted in culture. And there was at some point during an interview, I'm not going to mention with whom, but essentially I asked the person we were interviewing if the changes that this person was envisioning through the ILEAP was a change of the learning culture. And what this person replied was quite interesting, because they said, no, we're talking about knowledge of what learning should be. It's not a cultural matter. That surprised me, although actually the same person sort of went back to this statement, acknowledging that, of course, there is a cultural dimension in any activity, any human activity. But I would say that the feeling that I had, especially in the Trojan horse vision, is that there is a way in which we learn, and that is not dependent on culture, but dependent on brain, on how the brain works. So there is I would say that as an anthropologist or a husband of an ethnologist, I would say this might be a little bit problematic. But yeah, this is my answer.
Thank you. Can I please ask you to compress your 3 questions into one, please?
Yes, thank you.
Because I'm looking at the watch, and it's
I know that our resources
fast.
are limited, and I only wanted to ask one question now. We can have limitless discussions later. And first, I would like to fix my mistake I made. I didn't follow the rules. I didn't say my name, as others already said. My name is Margus Pedaste. And I'm a biologist too. And I wanted continue with my question about the resources. And I was actually surprised that you didn't mention the question about ethics in using AI in education. Because we have had long discussions with Professor Wayne Holmes from University College London on that topic. He is the UNESCO chair on AI in ethics in education. And you mentioned that the ideas like AI, for example, mobilize a lot of resources, but the resources are limited, as we know from physics. And in this case, I'm worried about how to decide if to use those resources, if to invest those resources. Because if the resources are limited, then we have to take out the resources for somewhere else. And as you said, that the AI is not intrinsically positive, good, then maybe we stop doing something good in order to invest something in AI. And that's really something that is important to consider. What is your point of view on that? And that's my last.
Ethics, yeah, about ethics. So in a previous life, I wrote my bachelor thesis on moral philosophy. And I think that the whole thing is, or may become, an ethical, moral, and political question. So everything is ethical in a way, precisely because of this, because our vision mobilizes resources. And interestingly enough, to have those data centers, in some cases we may resume some interesting practices that are usually called colonizing practices, which is a huge ethical, political, moral, and even existential issue. So for me, the foundation of this entangled AI literacy is ethical. So that's why I didn't explicitly mention it, because it deals exactly with decisions that concerns limited resources, as you were saying, in a world that has become more and more volatile, not so bright. But this is also part of the, ultimately, everything that concerns the futures is political in the end, which is probably the fate of our time, to repoliticize certain questions. Because, I don't know if you're familiar, it's not just about how much energy, how much water we spend when we use ChatGPT. It's also the construction of, we don't know how many data centers in places where water is scarce, but that for political reason makes sense to colonize. So, yeah, I didn't want to become like a priest, but... but the short answer is, AI literacy is founded upon ethics and politics.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Professor Bardone. And now it's time to congratulate and then have some snacks and drinks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.